Good morning, ladies, and welcome back to the 5 key hormones of metabolism. Today we are talking about estrogen. More specifically, we're going to be talking about estrogen dominance. And all week I have been talking about some of the major hormones that have an impact on our metabolism. We talked about cortisol on Monday. We talked about insulin on Tuesday. Yesterday, we talked about the thyroid. And if you want to see those, you can find the replays. Just go to the main group, look under announcements, and you will find all of those replays if you miss them. And way back at the beginning, when I first went live about cortisol, I sort of explained how hormones live in this hierarchy, where some of these hormones are going to have a bigger impact on our ability to lose weight, and some of them will have a little bit less impact. And I told you guys on Monday that cortisol is really sort of one of the most important hormones that we need to get under control, followed by insulin and then thyroid. And now we're kind of moving into some of the other, like the hormones that still have an impact, but it's not that they don't have as much impact, but basically if you just worry about these hormones, we're talking about estrogen and tomorrow human growth hormone. If you just worry about those and you don't get the first 3 under control, then you're going to run into problems because those ones are going to have the biggest impact. So these ones are still important, but on that hierarchy, they're kind of like at the top of the pyramid, not at the base. So I just wanted to put that out there. And again, the whole point of this mini series, if this is the first one that you're watching, is really just to show you that when it comes to weight management, when it comes to weight loss resistance, we need to understand that it is more complicated than calories in, calories out. Our hormones have an effect on our caloric intake, and our caloric intake has an effect on our hormones. So we need to understand that. And also just understanding the consequences of hormonal imbalances when it comes to our ability to lose weight. So that's what we're talking about today. When it comes to estrogen dominance, what I want to do is I want to clarify what estrogen dominance is. I want to explain to you how it impacts our ability to lose weight. I want to talk about all the different ways in which we can create an estrogen imbalance and move or shift into estrogen dominance. And then, of course, signs and symptoms of estrogen dominance and what we can do about it. So we are going to dive in. Hi, Sharon. I see Sharon's here. I see Alice is here. So thank you for joining me, ladies. And as always, if you can put either live or replay in the comments as you are watching this, any or just a heart, anything whatsoever, it will just help to push this video out to more of the members in our community, and I truly appreciate your help with that. So let's go ahead and dive in. So one of the things I want to start off by saying is that, you know, I think that women who are going through menopause, as you may know, menopause is a transition where our estrogen levels decline. And a lot of women might think, well, I don't have to worry about estrogen dominance because my estrogen levels are declining. And I just want to start off by saying that you can have low estrogen and estrogen dominance. And that's because when I'm talking about estrogen dominance, it's not so much about how much estrogen you have, it is how much estrogen you have in relation to progesterone. That's more important. And when it comes to that, when it comes to just understanding sort of that idea, I want to kind of give you guys a little bit of an understanding of what estrogen does and what progesterone does, and why it's important to maintain that balance. And the way that I like to think about it is, if you remember the movie Thelma and Louise, right? I don't know if you remember that one, but which one was the crazy one? Which one was the one that got them into the trouble? I think it was Thelma. So I want you to kind of think about estrogen and progesterone, right, as like balancing each other out. And estrogen's kind of like, I think it's Thelma. I think Thelma's the crazy one, or the instigator, the go-getter, the adventurous one. Like that's estrogen. She's driven. She builds us up, and gives us our lady curves. Whereas progesterone is more of the Louise, right? So progesterone is sort of a little bit more nervous, a little bit quieter. She's the one that worries. She's the caretaker. So estrogen needs to be progesterone keeps estrogen in check, basically. If you think of estrogen as the wild child, progesterone keeps estrogen in check. And so when that balance gets disrupted, estrogen has no one to keep her in check, and that's when she gets out of control, and that's when she becomes a problem. Because estrogen is really good for us, and we need estrogen, and estrogen does so many good things for our body, but when she doesn't have progesterone to keep her in check, she gets a little wild, and that's when it becomes problematic. So estrogen dominance can manifest in two different ways. So one is that you simply have too much estrogen. So progesterone levels are normal, but estrogen levels are high. The other scenario is that estrogen levels are normal, but progesterone levels are low, or estrogen levels are low and progesterone levels are even lower. But regardless, once again, when we're talking about estrogen dominance, we're talking about estrogen in relation to progesterone, like relative to progesterone. So let's talk about how estrogen dominance can cause weight gain and weight loss resistance, and how it kind of also has an impact on our belly fat specifically, because women always ask me like, Haley, how can I get rid of belly fat? That is what they want to get rid of. So the first thing I want you to understand is that estrogen plays a role in body fat distribution. Okay. So if you think of estrogen as that female hormone, when we have enough estrogen, and when we start to develop estrogen in our teenage years moving into our 20s, estrogen is what makes us, gives us that female shape. So when estrogen levels are in balance, we put on fat in our breasts, in our thighs, our hips, our butt, right? We get that sort of like Marilyn Monroe hourglass figure. But when estrogen levels are too low, often with postmenopause, and when estrogen levels are too high, estrogen dominance, it changes our fat distribution. So simply put, we start to store fat on our bellies instead of where women are supposed to be gaining their weight. And this has to do with the type of fat cell in those two areas, and I won't dive into it. We could talk about that another day, but just understand that when estrogen goes out of whack, our fat distribution changes and we start to gain weight around our belly. So that's number one. The second thing that we need to understand about estrogen dominance and how it impacts our ability to lose weight, and this is like the most important link, is that too much estrogen interferes with thyroid function. And we talked about thyroid function yesterday, so I am not going to go into it, but just understand that when we have estrogen dominance or too much estrogen, the scenario where we have too much estrogen, what happens is it slows down the thyroid output, and this slows down our metabolism, and now suddenly we're burning less calories than we should be, and we start to gain weight, or it becomes harder to lose weight because it's harder to get into a caloric deficit. Okay, that's kind of what it boils down to. The other thing that happens, and this is kind of a frustrating little vicious cycle, but estrogen dominance causes weight gain, and weight gain causes estrogen dominance. And this is because when we kind of get into this cycle, the more weight we have on our body, our fat cells are estrogen little production sites. So as we gain fat, we produce more estrogen. We become estrogen dominant, slows down the thyroid. We produce more fat, we produce more estrogen. So we kind of get trapped in this vicious cycle, which really, really sucks. The other problem when it comes to estrogen, and here I'm going to shift over and talk a little bit about something called xenoestrogens. And they are, we'll call them environmental environmental estrogens. We are surrounded by environmental estrogens. They are in our cleaning products. They are in our shampoo, our laundry detergent, all of these different products that we use on a daily basis. They contain environmental estrogens. And what happens is that, as well as other chemicals, it's not just environmental estrogens, all kinds of different chemicals. And so what happens is that as these chemicals come into our body, they're toxic, and our body's like, this isn't good, we've got to get rid of them. And our liver is what is supposed to be able to handle all of these toxins and environmental estrogens and everything else, all these chemicals, and also heavy metals, right? But if our liver isn't functioning properly, and we're going to be diving into this in a minute here, what happens is that we cannot detoxify. And so our body does the next best thing it can to protect us and get these toxins out of our body. And guess where they go? They go in our fat cells. And so you can think of our fat cells as like these little storage. And I talked about this when we were talking about insulin, how basically when it comes to fat cells, storage is unlimited. So it makes sense that that is where we would go and store the fat. And so if you think of it that way, when we're highly toxic, what our body is going to do is it's going to hang on to those fat cells to protect us, because it's a storage unit for those toxins. And interesting story here is like when my clients first start working with me, they go often through something called low carb flu. Sometimes it's called keto flu if their carbs are low enough. But regardless, what happens is that we create a metabolic shift, and suddenly their body is forced to use the energy stored in their fat cells as energy, because we've depleted glycogen, we've depleted carbohydrates. But what often happens is in that process, if they have toxic fat, those toxins get released into the bloodstream. And this is what gives people that low carb flu, where they get headaches and they have low energy and maybe they're achy. Like it literally feels like they have the flu, and it's because suddenly we're flooding the bloodstream with toxins and we have to get them out. So that can be part of it too. Also, more minor, but estrogen also causes water retention. So more estrogen causes more water retention, and it also causes inflammation. And inflammation can make weight loss a little bit more challenging as well. And we can talk about that another day. So I want to talk about what causes estrogen dominance, because I think this is going to help you to understand how potentially this might be something that you are struggling with. I think it is something that most women likely are potentially struggling with, just because of all of the different ways in which we can trigger estrogen dominance. And it's kind of a little bit of a complex little hormone. And likely if women are struggling with estrogen dominance, it's a combination of different factors. So the first one that I want to talk about is the liver, gallbladder, and gut connection. And so again, when we have too much estrogen, like our body is always trying to seek out balance, right? Always. Goldilocks, right? I've been talking about Goldilocks the whole time, and the same is true of estrogen, right? Our body likes to have estrogen at a certain point. Our body's always trying to seek out balance. And so our liver, our gallbladder, and our gut have the role of getting rid of any excess estrogens. And I want to explain how that works and how that potentially can kind of fall apart. Because if you have poor liver function, or you have no gallbladder, or you have poor gallbladder function, or you have poor gut health, these can all contribute to estrogen dominance. So starting off with the liver. So basically the liver, what happens with excess estrogens is they get sent to the liver, and the liver is in charge of detoxification. The liver has, it has so many different jobs in the body, but one is to help us detoxify excess estrogen. And so it goes into the liver, and there the liver is supposed to break it down into these like estrogen metabolites. So the first problem in just that phase of detoxification, if the liver is overburdened, like if it's already like like working overdrive because it's busy processing chemicals or toxins or alcohol or sugar or processed food, then what happens is that the liver can't even process the estrogen because it's already too busy, right? It's just like, man, you've already given me so many jobs, I can't even get to estrogen. So that can be part of the problem. If it does get through the liver, then what happens is that those metabolites that have been processed by your liver, they are supposed to go through your gallbladder and through your, like in your bile, they're supposed to get pushed into your digestive tract. But if you don't have a gallbladder, or if you have a sluggish gallbladder and you cannot produce the bile that is required, that can be problematic too, because then the estrogen can't get into the digestive tract. So that's sort of step 2 in that little chain of events. And then the third one is our gut health. So once these excess estrogens go through the liver and then through the gallbladder into our bile, into our digestive tract, what happens is it's supposed to bind with fiber and we're literally supposed to poop them out. However, this does not always happen, especially in women who have gut health issues, aka constipation. So what is going to happen is that now these estrogen metabolites get into our digestive tract, and if we are constipated or if we have like bad bacteria in our gut, those estrogens can be transformed again and they can go back into circulation. So our liver did its job, our gallbladder did its job, and we get into the intestinal tract and now we have an issue and they just go right back into the bloodstream and right back into circulation, and now everything has to happen again. So as you can imagine, this is very problematic. So that's one way in which estrogen dominance can happen. Another important thing to understand when it comes to estrogen dominance is just what is happening during perimenopause. So perimenopause is typically thought of as a period of estrogen dominance. So if you are in perimenopause right now, there is a very strong chance that this is going to affect you. And there's 2 reasons for that. Number 1 is levels of estrogen, which are going to go all over the place. So I have a really great graph, I'll have to find it, but it kind of shows how in our teen years, estrogen is like crazy. During our sort of fertile years, it kind of is just doing what it's supposed to do unless you have poor metabolic health. But in perimenopause, it's kind of like, it's like this last ditch effort. You know, your body's like, okay, this is it. This is our final chance to have babies. And your estrogen levels start to fluctuate all over again. And so you could literally have low estrogen one day and be like, oh my God, this is terrible, I'm having hot flashes. And then the next day you can have high estrogen. Like it literally goes all over the place. So that can cause sort of intermittent estrogen dominance. The other problem that can happen during perimenopause is that we start to have these anovulatory cycles, which is when we stop ovulating. And ovulation is crucial to the production of progesterone, because the follicle that releases the egg, that is where progesterone comes from. So if you don't ovulate, you don't have progesterone. And if you remember, estrogen dominance is all about estrogen in relation to progesterone. So if you don't have enough progesterone, you're estrogen dominant. Okay? And then finally, there are certain genetic predispositions, goodness me, that just make us more prone to estrogen dominance. But right here, I am going to say that when it comes to our genes, there is this field called epigenetics, which basically what you need to understand about genes is that you can turn them on or you can turn them off. And so even if you are genetically predisposed to estrogen dominance, the choices you make, your diet, your exercise, your lifestyle, how you manage your stress, all of these things will determine what happens to those genes. Okay, so it's not like you can blame it on your genes. Okay, so that would be internal. So externally, what can cause estrogen dominance? So number 1 is going to be stress. It goes back to cortisol once again. Like I said, cortisol is at the base. And here, if you remember from Monday, what I explained is that Cortisol is produced in the adrenals, as are our sex hormones, especially as we move into menopause. But if we are chronically stressed and our body is like focused on pumping out cortisol, it will not pump out sex hormones. And this can cause progesterone to drop and put us back into that state of estrogen dominance. The next one is environmental estrogens, which I talked about earlier. And simply put, we live in chemicals. They are literally everywhere. And a lot of these chemicals mimic estrogen. So what happens is that when they get inside of our body, they do exactly what estrogen would do. They can go into the cell receptors and lock in and send that same message. And so you could be naturally producing the right amount of estrogen, but if all of these environmental estrogens are coming into your body, then you will still have estrogen dominance because they literally act just like the estrogens that you produce. And just to give you an idea, this is like pesticides, cosmetics, cleaning products, plastic bottles like BPA, your Tupperware, receipts that you get when you go to the grocery store, our water supply, like literally we are exposed to them all day long. And then, as I said, there's this concept of toxic fat, right? Which I explained earlier, which is just this idea that our body kind of holds on to these because it's trying to protect us. The other thing to kind of think about or be aware of when it comes to estrogen dominance is phytoestrogens. So phytoestrogens, unlike environmental estrogens, they're in plant foods. They are plant-based estrogen, soy being like the most famous, right? Now, when it comes to phytoestrogens, there's different types. And some of them have a very strong estrogenic effect, and some of them have a very weak estrogenic effect. The ones that are very weak can actually improve estrogen dominance because when they lock into the receptor cell, they block other estrogens from getting in. But the strong ones like soy can make it worse. So we need to be careful and conscientious of which phytoestrogens we should be eating and which ones we should be avoiding, especially if we're already in an estrogen dominant state. And then last two, and as you can see, right, there's all kinds of things that can really throw hormone or estrogen out of whack. There's two more. So number one is birth control, which again, I know a lot of women get prescribed birth control when they move into perimenopause. And I know that like if you go on to the Center for Ovulation and Research, they will say, please don't do that, especially if you're in perimenopause. And what happens, and I had no idea, I didn't really know how birth control works, but essentially what's happened is birth control is synthetic estrogen. And the whole idea is that you are given estrogen on a daily basis to avoid your body increasing progesterone. So it's basically putting you in this state of estrogen dominance, and that can be problematic, obviously. And then finally, the last one is high carb diets. And how this works is that, as I was saying on Tuesday, when we were talking about insulin, is that when we eat too many carbs, more than our body needs, any kind of excess is going to eventually get turned into triglycerides, which is the storage form of fat. And going back to epigenetics and how we can turn on genes and turn off genes, when we have too many triglycerides, what happens is it turns off something called sex hormone binding globulin. And what that does is it binds to sex hormones. And as it binds to them, it makes them less metabolically active. When they're bound to that, they can't get in the receptor sites. But when we have more triglyceride, our sex hormone binding globulin goes down, which means that estrogen and testosterone, they're not bound to anything and they can go out and act on our cells. And so that can increase estrogen dominance. So again, lots of different things at play here that can cause it, and just understanding that, it's more complex, and we have to kind of, with this one, and we'll talk about what to do about it. But as you can see, there's multiple things that we need to think about. So signs of estrogen dominance. So any kind of estrogen dominant condition. So if you have like fibrocystic breasts, right? Like lumpy breasts. If you have fibroids, ovarian cysts, PCOS, you have a history of breast cancer, endometriosis, PMS. If you get like really bad PMS, that could be a sign. Weight gain, which we've kind of talked about, especially if you're noticing that weight gain happening around your belly, right? If you have like really heavy periods, if you're tired all the time, if you're depressed, or you have anxiety, if you are bloated and you feel like you're retaining water. These are all some of the more common signs of estrogen dominance. Now, how would you go ahead? Mood swings as well. Insomnia can be also estrogen dominance. I think it's also important to understand signs of low progesterone because low progesterone again can cause estrogen dominance, so you kind of have to look at both of them together. And this one, like poor sleep, is probably the biggest telltale sign of low estrogen. Anxiety, because again, progesterone is our calming hormone, right? So if you're anxious, and then if you're having a hard time conceiving, or you're having multiple miscarriages, which you probably wouldn't know about at this point in your life, but those are signs of progesterone. This is how I found out about having low progesterone in my 30s. The best way that you can test this is, again, the Dutch test, which I've talked about a few times this week. But the Dutch test is the urine test, where you're essentially measuring cortisol, estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, DHEA, melatonin. It does like a bunch of things. It's an expensive test. I think it's like a $300 test. And then on top of that, you also need to book an appointment to get your results analyzed. But I do think it's well worth it because, you know, you're investing in your health. Ultimately, you're investing in your health, and you're investing in how you're going to get through perimenopause and look and feel your best. Okay, so what are we going to do about it? So again, you know, as you can see, it's a little bit more complex than just saying like eat lower carbs, but it definitely does start with food. So we definitely want to do like a nutrient dense, anti-inflammatory diet that is lower in carbs. Again, going back to how it affects our triglycerides and how that affects our sex hormones. The other important thing is you've got to clean it up. We have to clean it up, and this is both our diet and our lifestyle. And you know, unfortunately, this is where I'm going to tell you that you have to buy organic, you have to buy antibiotic free, you have to buy hormone free, you have to buy non-GMO. You have to really be careful if you're going to be eating dairy or if you're going to be eating conventionally sourced meat. If you cannot afford it, because I know it's like, okay, this is great, Haley, but I can't afford organic. Really here, it's just about doing your best. It's going to be impossible for us to completely avoid environmental estrogens. It's going to be completely impossible. What we're trying to do is as best as possible reduce our exposure, right? So you could look up like the clean 15 and the dirty dozen, right? So that'll tell you like the 12 fruit and vegetables that are most toxic, where, you know, maybe you just decide, okay, I'm going to spend my money on those ones, organic, and the clean 15 I won't worry about, or whatever it may be. When it comes to meat, you know, if you cannot afford anything that is organic or grass-fed and grass-finished, or you can't find it anywhere because you live in a small town, whatever it may be, your next best option is antibiotic hormone-free, and your next best option is to get the leanest possible protein. Because again, remember how I said that toxins get stored in your fat cells? Well, toxins get stored in an animal's fat cells as well. And so if you are eating said fat and it is loaded with toxins, well, there you go, you just got exposed. The next thing that we want to do is, again, we want to support the liver as much as possible. And I did a whole workshop on this but I don't know if I did it in here or inside my private group. Anyways, we can talk about liver, but making sure we have enough fiber, reducing our intake of alcohol, of sugar, of processed foods, all of this, anything that we can do to support the liver, getting lots of cruciferous vegetables like cabbage and cauliflower and broccoli. All of this helps with just the detoxification process of the liver. Apple cider vinegar. There's so much you can do to support your liver. We can do a whole episode on that. And then another thing to keep in mind, and this could be another reason for estrogen dominance, is the whole conversion of testosterone into estrogen, which we talked about last Friday. But again, there are certain foods that trigger that conversion, and then there are certain foods that kind of put a break on it. So go back to that episode and you can learn more. Then the other thing that we want to do is we want to support the production of progesterone, because again, estrogen dominance is about estrogen in relation to progesterone. So another sort of obvious, or maybe not so obvious, is to really make sure that we are supporting progesterone. And here, one thing to keep in mind is, once again, like going too low carb too long, or going keto too long can have a negative impact on progesterone, because a lot of the foods that our body needs in order to produce progesterone are higher in carbohydrates. So like sweet potatoes, a really big one, or fruits that are high in vitamin C. And so again, if you're practicing carb cycling, then you can add those starches back in, especially right around that time of your period when you're supposed to be producing progesterone, in order to support your body's production. And then gut health, right? So what can we do to support the gut so that we have the right bacteria in our gut and we've got some movement, right? We're supposed to be pooping every single day. If you're not pooping every single day, you got to work on that. And this is going to be like fiber. Non-soluble fiber from vegetables. You can also incorporate something called resistant starch. We could do a whole episode on that, but essentially, resistant starch is called a prebiotic, and it feeds the bacteria in your gut. Fermented foods, probiotics, these are all things that we can do for our gut health, right? When it comes to estrogen dominance, this is one area where I feel like targeted supplementation might be worthwhile. Oftentimes my sort of viewpoint is like, let's start with food. Let's do our best with nutrition and not waste our money on supplements that we don't need. But there are certainly supplements that can help with the liver, that can help with our gallbladder, that can help with our digestive function, that you can research. And again, I am not telling you guys to take these supplements because it is outside of my scope of practice. I know nothing about you. I don't know what else you've got going on. So you've got to do your own research. But one is called indole 3-carbinol. And this one helps our body to detoxify excess estrogens. And interestingly, it is used by bodybuilders because it helps them to get rid of belly fat. So I think that's worthwhile to look into. And then the other one is called calcium D-glucarate. And that one, that one helps to ensure that the estrogens that have made their way into our digestive tract don't go back into circulation. So again, if you're just like, yeah, I am bunged up, Haley, and I poop every like 3-4 days, that might be something to look into. And then, of course, from a lifestyle perspective, stress management to support the adrenals so that we don't have that drop in progesterone and we're supporting our progesterone levels. You can see, hey, how it's all coming back. I say the same things over and over, which, is a little bit of an indication that it's not as complicated as it seems. And then finally, it's like clean up your environment. So, start looking at, again, pesticides or insecticides. What products are in your cosmetics? Are you still drinking out of plastic water bottles? Do you heat your food up in plastic Tupperware containers? What cleaning products are you using? Do you use fabric softeners? What about your tampon? Is it like a bleached tampon? Because all of these things, nail polish, this one, sadly. But again, do your best. But you know, all of these things, we can start to clean them up. And don't think that you have to do this overnight. These are things that you can work on slowly. So you know, maybe like once a week, you're like, or as you know, when you finish your bottle of detergent, be like, okay, well, instead of going and buying the exact same one, let's find something else. And, you know, yes, these things are more expensive, but you can certainly find deals. Like Winners, for example, I get, they have a one, it's called Better Body, I think. I can't remember. Anyways, but you can get like these massive things at Winners that are way safer for you and contain way less chemicals. And there's a site that you can go onto, ecw.org, and you can basically go on and search whatever product you're using, and it will tell you like sort of like yeah, it's not too bad, or like danger, get rid of that, like it's terrible for you. But these are definitely things that we can do. The two supplements. Yes. So one is, you can just look up I3C, Bev. So indole 3-carbinol with an O. And I can put these in the notes, and calcium D-glucarate. Okay, those are the two. And there are more, and we can certainly talk about more, but again, I think those are certainly two. Oh, another really good one is, it's called DIM, D-I-M. And that one's really good for helping with detoxification as well. So those would be like the three to potentially look into. So that's it for estrogen dominance. We're getting towards the end here. We have one more talk tomorrow. I'm talking about human growth hormone. I talked about this one back in March, but if you watch that, it will be a good review. If you miss that, then you will learn all about human growth hormone. I'll give you a little bit of a hint. It does two things in our body. Number one is it speeds up our metabolism. Number two is it is lipolytic, which means it is for fat burning. If you remember, insulin is anti-lipolytic. Well, HGH, or human growth hormone, is lipolytic. It is a fat burner. So you want to learn about that one. And again, you know, as we approach hey, it is Black Friday, right? No, tomorrow's Friday, not today. But I do have my Black Friday offer still ongoing right now. So if you want to learn how to put this all together, you know, if you just want to be told exactly what to do, if you want to learn how to implement it, then I would encourage you to take a look at what I've got going on for Black Friday. I am giving women a discounted price on Perimenopause Body Solutions, my personal coaching program. This is where you get to work one-on-one with me, and I'm going to help you out with your nutrition and your lifestyle and help you put it all together. And I've thrown in a bunch of bonuses, over $900 worth of bonuses. So definitely check that out. I'll come on probably Saturday and tell you a little bit more about the program. You can certainly book a call with me like as soon as possible if this is something you want to take advantage of. What I usually do is I hop on a call with women and I kind of talk about just like better understanding like what's going on, what are your goals, what's your dieting history, what are you currently doing, what have you tried, what's worked in the past, what's getting in the way, and then from there figure out if I think I can help with my personal coaching program. If I don't, I will certainly give you some advice and send you on your way. Yeah, take advantage. Thank you for joining me today. And Alice, you got it. We can talk about liver together. And I think that's it. So thank you, ladies. Oh, and if you want to get the cheat sheet that goes with this, you can sign up online. I'm not sending this out to people because I'm going live 5 times this week and I don't have time, but you can sign up for them. So you just go to projectmenopause.ca/mini-series. And I'm sending them out daily. And at the end of this whole thing, I'll do like a big recap, send out all the replays, all the cheat sheets in case you missed some. And I will see you guys tomorrow. Thanks for watching. Bye.